Welcome to Go Fact Yourself, the Top 10 Lists podcast.
Great to be diving in again.
You shared some truly wild top research this week, hinting at these moments, these kind of unsettling moments in history where government experiments just seem to veer way into science fiction territory.
Oh yeah, some of it is just hard to believe it actually happened.
So we took that research and plunged right in. Get ready for a top 10 journey into some of the most bizarre, frankly unbelievable government experiments ever conceived.
Absolutely. Our mission today really is to unpack these 10 instances.
Yeah. Pull out the most jaw-dropping facts, understand the context, why they did this stuff.
And maybe figure out what questions are still kind of hanging out there.
Expect a few moments where you might just say, WTF? No way that's real. So are you ready to go fact yourself?
Let's do it.
Okay, let's kick off this top 10 journey at number 10, the Psychic Warriors of Stargate Project.
Right, Stargate. What's immediately striking here is this was the U.S. Army back in the 70s and 80s.
During the Cold War, right?
Exactly. And they were seriously exploring psychic abilities for espionage. The whole thing was fueled by this atmosphere of suspicion.
Paranoia, basically. They were scared the Soviets were doing it first.
That's exactly it. They were genuinely concerned the Soviets might be developing psychic weapons or spies, and they absolutely did not want to be left behind, no matter how, well, unconventional the idea seemed.
Okay, so that Cold War fear kind of cracked the door open for some really out there ideas. And remote viewing. That was the core concept.
Yeah, remote viewing. Essentially, it was about training people to use their minds, their mental faculties, to get information about distant places or events.
Without actually going there, like just thinking about it.
Pretty much. They used different techniques, meditation, and something called coordinate-based viewing. They'd give subjects map coordinates.
Just numbers?
Yeah, geographical coordinates, and ask them to describe what they could, quote-unquote, see psychically.
Picture this.
Yeah.
Someone sitting in like a room in Maryland, staring at some numbers, and supposedly describing the inside of a Soviet submarine factory thousands of miles away.
That's the claim, yeah. Associated with an operative named Joseph McMonigal.
Right, I remember reading that name of the top research.
DECLASSIFIED documents do suggest he reportedly gave details about a Soviet sub-factory from Maryland using this remote viewing.
Okay, that's already pretty wild, but didn't it get even weirder? Something about Mars.
It definitely took a more bizarre turn. He also claimed he did astral projection.
Astral projection.
To Mars, way back, around 1 million BC.
1 million BC on Mars. And wasn't there something about, like, shadowy beings?
Yeah, one account, or at least a description from a subject, mentioned encountering tall, shadowy beings during these supposed trips to Mars.
It sounds like a movie plot, a really, really low-budget one. And this project, with people claiming to see aliens on ancient Mars, ran for how long?
Over 2 decades.
No way. How much did it cost?
Millions of taxpayer dollars went into Stargate over its lifespan. And while you hear these anecdotes, these claims of success...
Like the submarine factory.
Right. The actual verifiable intelligence gained its real impact. Highly, highly debated.
So questionable results, basically.
Pretty much. The program was eventually shut down. The official assessment was that it just hadn't produced consistently reliable or actionable intelligence. Makes you wonder, though.
About what?
Well, about belief, and how hard it is to objectively measure something like that, especially when everyone's under so much pressure.
Millions spent for maybe seeing shadows on Mars. Okay, let's move on. Number 9 in our top 10 journey, Operation Acoustic Kitty.
Ah, yes, Acoustic Kitty.
The CIA,
Yeah.
$20 million in the 1960s to turn cats into spies.
It's just, the concept itself is fascinating, right? The ingenuity is there, but it's coupled with this fundamental misunderstanding of cats.
Yeah, you think. Anyone who owns a cat could have told them that.
Well, the idea was to surgically implant these cats with tiny microphones, transmitters, batteries, surgically, into a cat.
Yeah, and they even tried to hide an antenna in the cat's tail.
In the tail. A perfectly disguised, furry little spy. You almost have to admire the sheer audacity if it wasn't so doomed.
Well, doomed is about right. The project's first field test was pretty definitive.
Okay, what happened?
They took the first feline operative, all wired up with his expensive gear, released it near a Soviet embassy right there in Washington, D.C.
Don't leave me hanging.
And it was almost immediately hit by a taxi.
No. Seriously. Hit by a taxi.
Yep. Instant catastrophic failure.
You cannot make this stuff up. $20 million for a cat spy program, and the first one gets flattened by a cab.
It's a darkly funny outcome, isn't it? After that, and probably some more failed attempts to train these incredibly independent animals,
Good luck with that.
the project was officially deemed a complete failure. 20 million down, one technologically enhanced cat casualty. It really highlights
Know your agent, especially if it naps 18 hours a day and ignores you. Exactly. Know the limitations, especially when your agent has a mind entirely of its own.
a very, very expensive lesson in feline autonomy. Okay, moving to number 8. This one takes a much darker turn, ethically speaking. MK Ultra.
Yeah, MK Ultra is deeply troubling. This was the CIA again, 1950s, 1960s. Illegal mind control experiments.
Using things like LSD, electroshock therapy.
Right, and conducted on unwitting people. Prisoners, sex workers, soldiers, even just regular civilians who had no idea what was happening to them.
That's the truly chilling part. Unwitting, no consent.
What stands out is just the breathtaking disregard for basic human rights, the ethical lines that were just obliterated, the scale of it, often without any consent. It's deeply disturbing.
Raises huge questions about government power and secrecy, doesn't it?
Absolutely. And then there's the case of Frank Olson.
The CIA scientist. His death was suspicious, right, after they secretly gave him LSD.
Exactly. He was unknowingly dosed by colleagues, and his death soon after. Well, it's still surrounded by suspicion, lots of theories. It really underscores how dangerous and unpredictable these experiments were.
And the effects on the subjects must have been horrific. The top research mentioned some really bizarre behavior.
Yeah, the documented accounts are chilling. People experiencing profound psychological distress, some subjects believing they were Jesus.
Oh.
Or doing incredibly dangerous things like trying to swim across New York Harbor. It just vividly shows the devastating, unpredictable effects of the drugs and techniques they were using.
It's horrifying to think about the long-term damage.
Yeah.
And didn't the CIA try to cover it up? Destroy the records?
They did. The CIA deliberately destroyed most of the MKUltra records. That makes it incredibly hard to grasp the full extent, the full consequences of what they did.
So a full accounting is impossible.
Largely, yes. The Senate Church Committee hearings in 1975 brought some of it to light, thankfully. But with so many documents gone, the full truth is elusive.
A stark reminder about unchecked power, I guess.
And the need for transparency, especially with this kind of research.
Definitely. And you still see its influence, right, in pop culture, like Stranger Things, The X-Files.
Oh, yeah. MKUltra has definitely cast a long shadow in fiction. Sometimes reality is just stranger and darker.
Okay, let's shift gears slightly. Number 7, the Soviet mind-machine experiments. Seems the U.S. wasn't the only one looking into weird science.
Well, given the Cold War rivalry, that makes sense, right? Both sides were probably exploring anything, no matter how strange, if it might give them an edge.
So what were the Soviets up to?
In the 70s and 80s, reports suggest Soviet scientists were developing what they called psychotronic machines.
Psychotronic. Sounds intense.
The idea was these machines could do things like detect lies, maybe read thoughts, even measure human auras.
Wait, auras? Like with cameras? That sounds like something you'd find at a psychic fair, not a secret Soviet lab.
It's an intriguing mix, isn't it? Pseudoscience may be meeting some kind of actual, if misguided, scientific effort. They had devices like the bioscope, supposedly able to read biological fields.
So the goal was maybe high-tech interrogation, peeking inside minds.
Potentially. Gaining insights beyond normal methods. But even within the Soviet system, there seems to have been a lot of skepticism.
They didn't actually get convincing results, did they?
That's the key thing. Despite the effort, there's very little credible evidence these experiments produced anything significant or useful. Lots of internal doubt, apparently. No real verifiable findings.
And isn't it kind of funny that after the Soviet Union collapsed, some of this tech supposedly showed up in Russian infomercials?
That's the story, yeah. For wellness diagnostics, it kind of speaks volumes about the lack of real scientific validity, doesn't it?
From Cold War tech to questionable wellness gadgets. Quite the journey.
Highlights the gap between wanting something to work and proving it actually does. But the whole idea of Soviet psychic tech still fascinates people, especially online.
Yeah, the allure of mind-reading tech never really dies, does it? Okay, number 6. And this one. This one's really disturbing. Project Sunshine.
Yes, Project Sunshine is. It's deeply troubling on an ethical level. This was US and UK scientists in the 1950s.
And what were they doing?
Secretly harvesting bones, mainly from deceased infants, all around the world.
Harvesting bones from babies. Why?
To study the effects of nuclear radiation, specifically strontium-90, which is produced by nuclear weapons testing fallout.
Okay, I can understand wanting to know the effects of fallout during the nuclear age,
Right.
but secretly taking bones without telling the parents.
That's the core ethical violation. Complete lack of transparency, no consent from the families. It's deeply unsettling. And the scale wasn't small.
How many?
Over 1,500 cadavers, mostly infants, were sampled, as they put it.
Sampled, wow, that's clinical language for something so awful.
If you put it in the context of the Cold War, the intense fear about nuclear fallout, you can maybe grasp the scientific drive behind it, wanting to understand the risks, but the methods
Were completely unethical.
unacceptable.
Undeniably, a serious violation of trust of human dignity. I read about a British mother who found out decades later her daughter's legs were missing. Just unimaginable.
It underscores the trauma, the betrayal these families felt. When this stuff got declassified in the 90s, there was rightly a huge public outcry, ethical condemnation.
So the data might have been scientifically useful?
Perhaps it might have helped understand radiation effects, but the way they got it, indefensible by today's standards. Or any standard, really.
Yeah. It's a grim reminder that science needs ethics, needs respect for people.
Absolutely. Progress can't come at that cost.
Okay, let's move to number 5. Back to the animal kingdom, apparently. DARPA's robo-dolphin spies.
Right. It seems the idea of animal agents didn't entirely die with Acoustic Kitty.
So dolphins this time.
Dolphins and sea lions. The U.S. Navy's marine mammal program actually goes back to the 60s,
Okay.
but DARPA's classified program in the early 2000s seemed to ramp things up, equipping these animals with surveillance gear and maybe even weapons.
Robo-dolphins, like Flipper with a camera, or worse.
Reports suggest they could do things like tag enemy divers, retrieve objects from the seabed, detect mines, things marine mammals are naturally good at.
Okay, that makes some sense. But weapons.
That's the controversial part. Allegations surfaced about training dolphins to potentially neutralize enemy divers.
How?
With things like CO2-powered nose darts, according to some reports.
Nose darts on a dolphin. This sounds like a James Bond villain's plan.
It does have that feel, doesn't it? Understandably, this caused a huge controversy. Animal welfare groups like PETA were and are very concerned.
About the ethics, the animal's well-being in combat zones.
Exactly. Using intelligent creatures like that in potentially hostile situations raises serious questions.
And this program is still going, still classified.
That seems to be the case. The Navy generally says they're used for detection and recovery, treated humanely, not for direct attack.
But the secrecy keeps the speculation going, right? Weaponized dolphins swimming around out there.
It inevitably fuels debate about using animals in the military. It's a strange thought.
Yeah, somehow psychic spies seem less weird than killer dolphins. Okay, number 4. Delving into a really dark historical period. Nazi meth zombies. Operation Purr-fessional.
Yeah, this is a stark example of desperation and ideology leading to dangerous strategies. The Nazi military during World War II...
And they were using meth?
Methamphetamine, yes. Under the brand name Pervitin, they used it widely to try and create super soldiers.
Super soldiers.
The idea was the stimulant effects would let soldiers fight longer, need less sleep, be more aggressive. They wanted any edge they could get.
And this wasn't some secret experiment on a few guys.
No, it was widespread. Pervitin was issued almost like candy before battles. The phrase blitzkrieg equals methkrieg wasn't entirely metaphorical.
Wow, blitzkrieg fueled by meth.
Yeah.
But the side effects, I mean, it's meth, hallucinations, paranoia, aggression.
Exactly. Not exactly ideal for clear thinking under fire. And there's this, maybe exaggerated but telling story about a Finnish soldier.
Yeah.
Supposedly took 30 Pervitin pills, blacked out for a week, somehow skied like 250 miles, fought Soviets, lost consciousness, and woke up next to a dead reindeer he'd apparently tried to eat raw, having lost all his ammo but still clutching grenades.
30 pills. That story, even if partly legend, says a lot. The reality must have been brutal.
Oh, absolutely. German military medical archives, the ones that are declassified, document soldiers suffering severe side effects. Deaths even attributed to exhaustion and psychotic behavior linked directly to Pervitin.
So it's a flawed strategy with a huge human cost?
Definitely. And after the war, it left a legacy of addiction. The Allies confiscated millions and millions of these pills. It's sobering to think a world war was partly powered by meth.
Truly is. Okay, number 3. This one's a classic for conspiracy theorists. HARP.
HARP, the High Frequency Active Auroral Research Program up in Alaska.
Officially, it's for studying the ionosphere, right? Radio waves, atmosphere stuff.
That's the official line, yes. Studying that layer of the atmosphere that's important for radio communications, radar, things like that.
But it's this huge antenna farm, super powerful, and people think it does other things.
It's a perfect example of how advanced science, especially if it has military links, becomes a magnet for alternative theories. The sheer power, 180 antennas, 3.6 megawatts.
That's a lot of juice aimed at the sky.
Right. And then there are things like physicist Bernard Eastland's patent.
What about it?
He patented a method and apparatus for altering a region in the Earth's atmosphere before HARP was built. And the tech described has some similarities.
So people connect those dots and think. Weather control, earthquakes, mind control.
Those are the big theories, yeah. Weather manipulation, triggering earthquakes, maybe even disrupting thoughts.
No.
The initial funding came from the Air Force and Navy, which adds to the mystique for some.
Even though it's run by the University of Alaska now.
Right. But the conspiracy theories persist. The idea of a secret government weather machine or something even stranger, it just resonates with anxieties about hidden power and technology we don't understand.
It's a story that just won't die, it seems. Okay, we are down to number 2 in our top 10 journey. And this one is just audacious. Project A119.
Yeah, audacious is the word. The U.S. Air Force plan, back in 1958.
To do what?
To detonate a nuclear weapon on the moon.
Nuke the moon. Seriously, why on Earth or off Earth would they want to do that?
To intimidate the Soviets. It was pure psychological warfare during the height of the space race and Cold War. A demonstration of power.
Just to show they could. To make a big flash visible from Earth.
Exactly. To show the Soviet Union and the whole world America's unbeatable technological and military might. And this wasn't just some crazy idea floated around.
It was a real plan. With paperwork.
It was approved. Paperwork exists. And get this, Carl Sagan, the famous astronomer.
Carl Sagan was involved.
He's part of the team. His job was to calculate how visible the nuclear explosion would be from Earth. His notes were classified until the 90s.
That is unbelievable. Carl Sagan calculating the blast radius for nuking the moon.
His expertise on planetary atmospheres made him the guy to figure out how the dust cloud and flash would look. It shows how seriously they took this.
So the plan was literally launch an ICBM, an intercontinental ballistic missile,
with a W-25 nuclear warhead.
And just blow up a chunk of the moon. The sheer nerve of that.
It's almost beyond comprehension. Think about the scientific consequences, the contamination, the global reaction.
It would have been terrible. Why didn't they do it?
Thankfully, concerns were raised, mainly about contaminating the moon permanently with radioactive material, making future exploration impossible or dangerous. And also the likely negative public reaction worldwide. So it was canceled.
Phew. Close call for the moon.
Yeah.
You wonder what else was on the drawing board back then.
Exactly.
Right.
What other WTF plans got shelved?
U.S. nukes the moon. And still sounds fake. Okay, finally, number 1 on our top 10 journey. And this is without doubt the most disturbing, the most ethically bankrupt. Unit 731.
Yes. Unit 731 is. It represents an absolute low point. Imperial Japan's covert biological and chemical warfare research unit during World War II operating in occupied China.
And the experiments they conducted? They're horrific.
They are almost beyond comprehension. Systematic, brutal human experimentation. It's vital we don't forget these atrocities.
They refer to the victims as logs, Maruda, completely dehumanizing them.
Yes. And these victims, Chinese civilians, prisoners of war from allied nations, Russians, even some Japanese dissidents, were subjected to horrors like live vivisection without anesthesia.
Vivisection. Cutting people open while they're alive.
Yes. Deliberately infecting them with plague, anthrax, cholera, other pathogens to study the diseases, testing weapons on them, frostbite experiments where they'd freeze limbs and then try thawing methods.
Oh my God.
Testing flamethrowers, grenades, subjecting people to high-pressure chambers until their bodies ruptured, forced pregnancies to study disease transmission. It's just stomach-churning evil.
The absolute abandonment of any humanity or ethics is staggering.
Complete lack of any ethical consideration for the immense suffering they inflicted.
And maybe the most sickening footnote to this horror, the U.S. government's role after the war.
That's a deeply controversial part of the story. The U.S. granted immunity from war crimes prosecution to many of the key scientists involved in Unit 731.
Immunity. For that, why?
In exchange for their research data. The U.S. intelligence community wanted the information on biological warfare that Unit 731 had gathered through these horrific experiments.
So they traded justice for data. Let mass murderers walk free to get their notes.
That's essentially what happened. It's an ethically fraught decision, prioritizing perceived national security gains over accountability for unimaginable crimes against humanity. It raises profound questions.
And these atrocities were covered up for decades, weren't they?
Largely suppressed, yes. Didn't really come to wide public knowledge until the 1980s. And even today, Japan's official acknowledgement and apology for Unit 731's actions remain incomplete or contested in the eyes of many historians and victims groups.
It's just a chilling reminder of wartime atrocities and the long struggle for historical truth and accountability.
Absolutely. It stands as a stark warning about how science can be hideously perverted when ethics are thrown out the window.
So as we've heard throughout this top 10 journey, that line between science fiction, or maybe horror fiction, and actual historical reality, it can be disturbingly thin sometimes.
Yeah, these experiments reveal a past full of, well, ambition, paranoia, and some really deep ethical failings that we're still grappling with.
From psychic spies and weaponized cats, which seem almost comical in hindsight.
Until you get to things like MK Ultra, Project Sunshine.
And then the plan to nuke the moon and the absolute horror of Unit 731, the declassified files really are stranger than fiction.
Makes you wonder, doesn't it? What other plot twists might still be hidden away in classified archives? What's happening now that we won't know about for decades?
We hope this top 10 journey has given everyone a fascinating, maybe unsettling, but important glimpse into these events. Perhaps it sparks some curiosity to look deeper.
Yeah, check out the declassified documents yourselves. Ask more questions about where government, science, and ethics collide.
Thanks for joining us on this top 10 journey. Now, as always, go forth and fact-check everything.
Especially the headlines that seem too bizarre to possibly be true, because sometimes they are, and maybe think about this. With technology advancing so fast and global tensions always simmering, what kinds of experiments, what ethical lines might be getting pushed right now just out of sight?